I've spent 7 years growing vegetables in containers, testing for one trait: do they come back on their own or die at season's end? Out of everything I tried, only 12 made the cut. Every spring, most container gardeners do the same thing: rip out last year's dead plants, buy new seeds, start new seedlings, repeat. It's so normal nobody questions it. But it doesn't have to work this way. Some vegetables keep producing year after year without you starting from scratch. Plant once, they come back stronger. Next year, the year after, sometimes for a decade or more. Today, the 12 perennial vegetables that made my final list. Plants that turn your pots into a long-term food system, not a yearly chore. Some are common, a few you've probably never heard of. And by number 1, you'll see why growers call it the best long-term investment a container garden can make. 12. Chives. Most kitchen herbs fade after one season. Chives just don't stop. Once established, this plant keeps producing for a decade or more, almost no maintenance. And unlike most on this list, it asks for almost nothing. Here's why: chives are part of the onion family. They grow from a tight cluster of small bulbs that multiplies underground every year. You're not replanting, you're watching the same root system compound, season after season. 10 bulbs planted in spring is often enough to start a lifelong patch. The upside is simplicity. A container just 6 inches deep works, though 10 inches gives stronger roots. 6 to 8 hours of sun, evenly moist soil, that's it. Snip what you need, cut close to the base, and it regrows in days. Year 1, harvest 3 to 4 times, after that, once a month through the season. No fertilizing schedule, no babying, just steady growth in one of the smallest containers on this list. But here's the catch: over time the clump develops a donut effect. A dead center forms while the outer edges stay vigorous. The oldest bulbs exhaust themselves first and new bulbs keep forming outward. Left alone, yield drops sharply by year 6. Worst case, the hollow center kills the whole clump. The fix: divide it. Every 3 to 4 years, dig up the clump. Use your fingers or 2 forks back to back and tease it apart into sections, each with healthy bulbs and white, intact roots. Discard the dead center. Replant the living sections 6 to 12 inches apart. Skip this and your thriving chive pot slowly hollows out from the inside, producing less every year, until there's nothing left worth harvesting. One more reason to divide: chives left to flower put their energy into blooms, not leaves, and the flavor turns coarse. Deadhead the flowers or divide before they form and the plant's energy stays where you want it. The plant everyone calls low effort forever has a hidden expiration date built in, unless you know the one trick that resets the clock. 11. Salad burnet. Most leafy greens wilt the second soil dries out. Salad burnet almost prefers neglect. This drought-resilient perennial keeps producing crisp, cucumber-flavored leaves through conditions that would kill tender greens in an afternoon. Once established, it can keep going for up to 2 decades from the same pot. Here's why: salad burnet is part of the rose family, native to dry, chalky grasslands across Europe and Asia. That's why it shrugs off poor soil, drought, even light deer damage. It tolerates a wide pH range, but for the sharpest flavor, growers keep it alkaline 6.8 to 7.8, the opposite of what most vegetables want. Serious growers build a maritime alkaline mix, crushed oyster shells worked into free-draining soil, basically a coastal beach recreated in a pot. And it's not just for show. Rich compost gives you lush, bland growth. Lean, poor soil is what makes the flavor sharp. The payoff: a fresh, crunchy green that tolerates heat, skips fussy watering, and fits in a container as small as 8 to 12 inches deep. One of the most space-efficient plants on this list. It stays compact too, rarely over 24 inches even at full maturity. Evergreen in mild climates, cold hardy to zone 4, surviving down to degrees F. In harsher zones, just bring the pot inside for winter. Here's the thing about that neglect: it's not zero maintenance forever. Like chives, salad burnet spreads by rhizome. Left unchecked, clumps crowd themselves and lose vigor, so growers divide it every few years, which conveniently gives you free plants for other pots. Age matters too. Older leaves, older plants, tougher, less flavorful. Most growers rotate the harvest, letting fresh growth take over instead of waiting for one big cutting. And there's a seasonal rhythm: heat above 86 degrees F slows growth and turns leaves bitter. Best harvests come in spring and fall, with the plant resting through peak summer. One of the smallest footprints on this list, a lifespan measured in decades, and a genuine preference for the exact conditions that kill weaker plants. That's salad burnet at number 11. 10. Tree collard. Traditional collard bolt and die after one season, tree collard keep climbing, literally. In the right container, this perennial brassica grows into a small, harvestable tree, producing greens for years, sometimes decades. We're in the top 10 now, and the plants only get more resilient from here. Here's why tree collard are the same species as kale, cabbage, and broccoli. But unlike their relatives, they skip the flowering and dying stage almost entirely. Instead of making seeds, the plant grows a genuinely woody stalk. Left alone, that stalk can climb 6 to 12 feet. Some growers report over 10 feet by year 3. In the ground, tree collard live 5 to 20 years. In containers, 5 to 10 with attentive care. That height creates a problem, though. Left unpruned, tree collard get leggy and top-heavy. They flop into a tangle, especially once wet winter soil destabilizes a heavy crown. 2 fixes. First, staking. Once the plant hits 2 to 3 feet, tie it to a metal T-post or rebar anchored to the pot and let it grow tall like a young staked fruit tree. Second, hard pruning. Cut it back to 12 inches twice a year and it stays a short, stout shrub instead of a tree. Lower maintenance, better suited to a container. Either way, prune to the first leaf axil every few months and you get dense new leaves instead of bare stem. The payoff is volume. This isn't a windowsill herb, it's a real leafy green producer. Large, thick, slightly waxy leaves, sweeter and less bitter than traditional collard. Some purple varieties even deepen in color as it gets cold, a visible sign of cold tolerance. Hardy to around 20 degrees F. In mild climates, harvest nearly year-round, picking from the outside in. The catch is space, and it's real. This needs at least 20 gallons, 18 inches deep, roughly as wide, to support the root mass. Undersized pots force constant pruning just to keep up, and mature plants need repotting every year or two. One more thing, tree collard are almost always started from cuttings, not seed. The plant rarely makes viable seed of its own. One more sign that skipping the flowering stage is exactly what makes this whole plant work. 9. Rhubarb. Most garden vegetables need replacing every year. Rhubarb settles in once, then keeps expanding its harvest for the next decade. Some growers report crowns over 10 years old, still going strong in the same pot they started in. This is about mass, not magic. Rhubarb is a heavy feeder with a large, fleshy crown and a deep root system. It needs real volume of rich, loamy soil to buffer the moisture swings that containers create. Shallow pot, it stalls out. Real depth, and that crown keeps building, pushing out thicker stalks every spring. This is also why rhubarb is strictly one plant per container. The roots are too big, too hungry to share space. The payoff is scale. This is a genuine harvest, pies, sauces, preserves for weeks at a stretch every spring without replanting a thing. But that harvest has to be earned. No harvesting in year 1, a handful of stalks in year 2. Full harvest, 8 to 10 weeks, starts in year 3, and always leave 5 or 6 healthy leaves on the plant so it keeps feeding the crown for next year. The pot size is non-negotiable. Most guides say 18 to 24 inches deep. 20 by 20 is the number that comes up most. Why? The root mass is doing double duty, storing energy and physically anchoring a plant that gets surprisingly large. Undersize it and the crown never matures, stalks stay thin, the plant fizzles out in a season or two. The crown itself needs precise depth too, bud eyes 1 to 3 inches below the surface. Too deep it rots, too shallow it dries out. Here's the trade-off nobody mentions. Rhubarb pulls hard on its soil. Skip your annual top dressing, fresh compost or manure each spring, a light feed mid-season and production visibly stunts. Thin, pale, fibrous stalks. Most perennials on this list shrug off a missed year. Rhubarb can't, and even established plants need dividing every 4 to 5 years. Cut the crown into sections, each with a healthy bud, or it overcrowds and declines. The same size and depth that make rhubarb harder to start are exactly what let it outlast almost everything else on this list, once it's established. 8. Sea kale. Most vegetables trace their popularity to the last few decades. Sea kale has been a food crop since the turn of the 18th century in Britain, genuinely historic, and it's quietly making a comeback. We're deep in the top 10 now. The plants keep getting more resilient, more productive, and more unheard of. Here's why it lasts. Sea kale is a halophyte, a salt-tolerant plant that evolved on coastal shingle beaches in Europe. Built to handle sharp drainage and mineral-heavy soil, exactly what containers usually struggle to replicate. Instead of fighting root rot and standard potting mix, sea kale thrives in the same maritime alkaline blend that benefits salad burnet, crushed oyster shells and all. A permanent beach environment on your patio. Because the roots go deep, container growers need to size up beyond what most other entries on this list require. The payoff is twofold. First, the blanched young shoots. A technique called forcing cover the dormant crown with a light-proof bucket or terracotta forcing pot in late winter. Deprived of light, the shoots grow pale, tender and sweeter than the plant's naturally bitter green growth. Ready in 4 to 6 weeks once they hit 6 to 8 inches. This was a luxury vegetable on Georgian and Victorian dinner tables, proof of a gardener's skill, prized enough for royal banquets. Second, once established, the crown comes back every spring, almost no work required, the same forced shoot delicacy year after year from one root system. Established plants stay productive for around 10 years. Here's the catch, and it's strict: don't touch it until year 3, 2 full seasons to build root reserves before it can survive being forced or cut. Even after that, restraint matters. Take more than a third of the crown's growth in one season and you can weaken or kill it. Serious growers alternate, harvest one year, let it rest the next. This isn't a plant for gardeners chasing a quick win. It's a long game. But give it 3 years, a deep container and the right mineral-rich mix, and a vegetable once reserved for aristocratic tables is sitting quietly in your backyard. 7. Jerusalem artichokes, sunchokes. Most root vegetables need replanting from scratch every spring. Sunchokes leave a piece of themselves behind every time you harvest, so digging them up is what plants next year's crop. They spread through underground tubers. Even a small leftover fragment sprouts a full new plant next season. In an open garden bed, that's a problem. Sunchokes take over entire beds within a couple seasons. Ask any gardener who regrets planting them, but move that same plant into a container or grow bag and the trait flips. The pot contains the spread. What's a menace in the ground becomes a controlled, self-perpetuating harvest. The payoff is volume. Sunchokes are heavy producers. Growers consistently find far more tubers than they expected. A single container can yield several pounds of nutty, water chestnut-textured tubers from one season. The requirement: depth and the right mix. Sunchokes want a deep tuber mix, composted bark and sand, which stops the tubers from forking when they hit compacted soil. Cramped conditions and they twist and split instead of growing plump and straight. One trade-off worth knowing: because sunchokes are so productive underground, this is one of the few plants on this list you actually want to harvest hard every single year. Leave the container untouched for a season and the tubers overcrowd each other, next year's yield takes the hit. The exact trait that makes sunchokes a nightmare in an open bed is what makes them one of the most reliably self-sustaining crops on this entire list, once they're contained. 6. Horseradish. Most root crops stay put where you plant them. Horseradish doesn't. It spreads with an underground ambition that makes seasoned gardeners avoid planting it directly in the ground, and that same trait makes it one of the most effortlessly self-renewing crops you can grow in a pot. We're in the top 6 now. The plants left on this list aren't just resilient, they're borderline unstoppable. Horseradish spreads through lateral roots, and like sunchokes, any small fragment left behind regenerates the entire plant. In an open bed, that means it can colonize several feet of soil within a season or 2. Ask around, most longtime gardeners will tell you, never plant it directly in the ground. Containerize it and that liability flips. The pot walls become a hard boundary the roots can't escape. You get the self-perpetuation without ever losing control of your garden. The payoff: a lifetime supply of something you genuinely can't buy fresh. That sharp, pungent root turned into homemade horseradish sauce from a single root system you never replant. The requirement is the same deep tuber mix that benefits sunchokes: composted bark and sand, built to stop root forking. Horseradish wants to grow long and straight. Shallow or compacted soil forces it to twist, splitting the harvest into smaller, harder-to-use pieces. One maintenance note: horseradish is vigorous enough that it needs root pruning every 2 to 3 years. Pull the plant, shave off the outer third of the root mass, replant. Skip this and the roots go root-bound, a woody barrier that chokes the plant's own oxygen supply and slows production. Most gardening guides warn you away from horseradish. In a container, it's one of the lowest maintenance, most self-sustaining crops on this entire list. 5. Chinese artichokes, krasnes. Most root vegetables you'd recognize on sight. This one looks almost sculpted underground, pale, knobby, spiral-shaped tubers most gardeners have never even seen, let alone grown. We're in the top 5 now, the absolute elite of this list. Krasnes spread the same way mint does, relentlessly. They form pale, finger-sized tubers with a distinctive knobby shape beneath tidy, 2-foot-tall green mounds. And because it's nearly impossible to find every tuber at harvest, some are always left behind, growing next season without you lifting a finger to replant. The payoff is a genuine specialty crop most people never taste outside a high-end restaurant. Crisp texture, sweet, nutty flavor. It commands a high price in specialty markets across Europe and North America, despite being one of the easier plants on this entire list to grow. The proof is historical. Crosnes take their name from the French village where they were first cultivated. Today, they're a favorite in French fine dining, a seasonal delicacy. One thing to know, this isn't a set-it-and-forget-it spreader like some earlier entries. Containment matters. Harvest thoroughly each season or the patch overcrowds instead of staying productive. A genuine restaurant delicacy, commanding premium prices in specialty markets, and it's quietly one of the easiest, most self-perpetuating vegetables on this entire list. For sorrel. Most leafy greens show up late in the season. Sorrel is often the first thing through the soil as winter fades, a lemony, tangy green ready to harvest before almost anything else in your container garden has even started. We're deep in the top 3 now, the plants gardeners quietly consider the elite of this entire list. Sorrel grows from division, not seed. You can start it from seed, but most growers use root divisions, and perennial sorrel spreads into a clump underground over time. One planting doesn't just survive year to year, it expands, more to harvest every season. And it's genuinely low maintenance. In zones 5 and warmer, sorrel is a true perennial, and dividing it every 3 to 4 years keeps it renewed indefinitely. The payoff is size and speed. Sorrel grows in a container as small as 6 inches, larger pots on 8-inch centers. Once established, it's cut and come again, snip the outer leaves, and it just keeps producing. The proof is resilience. English sorrel is cold hardy to zone 4. It survives winter across most of the U.S. with zero special protection, rare this late in the list. One quirk, sorrel tends to reappear on its own to the point of becoming mildly invasive if left unchecked. Exactly the kind of aggressive spreader a container is built to control. The plant most likely to feed you first each spring is also one of the least demanding on this entire list to keep alive. 3. Lovage. Celery is one of the fussiest vegetables you can grow, constant moisture, careful blanching, starting from scratch every single year. Its perennial lookalike does almost the opposite. Plant it once and you may never grow celery again. We're officially in the top 3 now, the very best this list has to offer. Lovage is a long-lived perennial that comes back reliably year after year. And every few years you can dig up the roots and divide them, freshening the plant, sparking vigorous new growth. Replant the sections and one container quietly becomes several. The payoff is a real substitute for one of the hardest vegetables to grow. Celery is slow, thirsty, and technically a biennial that gets grown as an annual starting over every single year. Lovage skips all of it, perfect for beginners and experts alike. The whole plant smells like celery and works as a substitute for it. Even the hollow stems double as edible straws, right down to a Bloody Mary garnish. The proof is scale. Growers report lovage hitting 6 feet tall by year 3, sturdy stems that don't even need staking in strong wind. Remarkable vigor from a single planting. One thing to know, the flavor is bold. Use the stems anywhere you'd use celery, but a little goes a long way. One container plant is usually all a household needs. The hard vegetable it replaces is annual and demanding. The easy substitute is a perennial that thrives on neglect. 2. Egyptian walking onions. Most onions stay rooted where you plant them. This one doesn't wait for you to replant it at all, it plants itself, one step at a time, across your entire container. Exactly how it earned its name. We're in our top 2 now, the plants that made growers rethink what perennial even means. This is the strangest self-propagation trick on the list. Instead of flowers and seeds, the plant grows a cluster of tiny bulbs at the top of its stalk. As the cluster gets heavier, the plant droops, topples over, and plants itself a short distance away. Repeat that cycle and the plant slowly walks around the garden. In a container, that walk is contained, a self-multiplying onion patch, expanding on its own schedule. The payoff is a genuinely no-fuss green onion supply. A handful of bulbs is all it takes to start your own forever patch. Once established, you'll rarely buy green onions again, And nothing goes to waste, the tender green leaves in spring, the regrowth after every cutback, the bulbils, even the main bulb if you choose to harvest it. The proof is toughness. Walking onions survive down to degrees F, growing across USDA zones 3 through 10, pests barely touch them, insect or wildlife. In containers, a pot 12 to 14 inches deep with good drainage keeps the cycle going indefinitely. This is the one vegetable on the entire list that doesn't just survive being left alone. It uses that neglect to expand its own harvest. 1. Asparagus. Every other vegetable on this list you harvest. This one you don't just harvest, you make a decision once and live with it for decades. We've made it to number 1, and this is the entry that explains everything we've been building toward. Asparagus takes real time, 2 to 3 years before it's established, ready to produce. But that wait isn't wasted, it's invested. Every season the crown spends building itself underground is a season it's storing up for the future. Start harvesting in year 2 or 3 and established plants stay productive for years. In the ground, that can run 20 years or more. The payoff is exactly what we promised at the start of this video. A container that keeps producing fresh spears every spring without you touching a seed packet again. And here's the one honest trade-off on this entire list. Growing asparagus in a container shortens its lifespan compared to the ground. After establishment, expect 2 to 4 seasons of active harvest before the crown needs refreshing. Not the 20-year legend, but still years of harvest from one planting. The requirement is depth and commitment. Each crown needs a container at least 18 inches deep, 12 inches across, planted 6 to 10 inches deep. Fresh soil on top every year as the plant depletes what's around it. And asparagus is strictly 1 plant per container. Crowd 2 crowns in together and root disease can kill both. This is why asparagus closes the list. Not the flashiest entry, not the most obscure, not the fastest payoff. It's the one that captures the whole idea behind this video. You stop starting from scratch and you start building equity in your soil. Every spear you pull next spring is proof the effort you put in years ago never disappeared, it just kept growing. And there you have it, 12 perennial vegetables, plant once, harvest for years. Remember that habit from the start of this video: buy seeds, start seedlings, tear everything out, do it again next spring. That cycle isn't a rule, it's just the version of gardening most of us were handed without ever being told there's another way. Every plant on this list breaks that cycle in its own way. Chives and Egyptian walking onions multiply themselves without you lifting a finger. Rhubarb and sea kale ask for patience up front and pay you back for a decade or more. And asparagus, the one we just walked through, proves the best harvests aren't the ones you rush, they're the ones you're willing to wait for. That's what this whole list comes down to. You stop starting from scratch. You start building equity in your soil. Every container on this list isn't just holding a plant, it's holding a few years of your future harvests already in motion. So here's my question, out of all 12, which one are you most excited to plant? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If this video changed how you look at container gardening, hit subscribe. More videos coming on turning a handful of pots into a real, lasting food system. You won't want to miss them. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.